Hi, I'm Kelly at Book and Paper Arts, and in today's video I'm going to show how I transformed this vintage book cover to this piece using original pieces of paper and other ephemera, collage techniques, some assemblage. If you like altered arts, altered books, and vintage books and paper, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn on the notifications. That way you will have more of them in your life. Now, let's go alter a book cover. I did not dismember this book myself. This book cover came like this from my local secondhand bookstore. They have a box there called Battered But Beautiful. And people donate stuff to this bookstore. Their trash is my treasure. So this book cover was just sitting in that box, waiting to make me happy. It says, "Knowledge is power." So I don't mind this coffee stain, but I really am not crazy about this beigey vanilla color. So I'm going to cover that and give this piece of background using this dictionary page. This is from a French dictionary from 1842. And I got it last fall when I was in a French thrift store, and I'm going to show you this dictionary because it is one of the prettiest books I own. It's got a lot of distress here on the cover, but the covers are green marbled papers. Just beautiful. So I am in love with this thing. I took a page and then I carefully marked it off and trimmed it. And now I'm going to add it. I'm going to use some acrylic gel medium. You can also use white craft glue PVA or Mod Podge. All of those would work. But this is my go-to glue. So I'm just covering this. It's a little bit thirsty, so I need to make sure I get plenty of that adhesive on there. And make sure that I get the edges especially, because that's where this piece is maybe going to want to peel up. Get it into place, and then I'm going to take this is a spatula for mixing paint or wallpaper paste. I'm not sure. I got it in a hardware store. And I'm making sure I have a very, very clean bond there. I'm using this grease-proof paper, this parchment paper, because if I was to just drag this across the glue, the paper itself, especially when it's a little bit damp from the glue, I would just have a hot mess. This way, it's protecting the damp paper. It's letting me work the glue underneath. Look, there's some little bulgy things there, so now I can go back. See what I can do with those. The next thing that I did was I took my blending tool and an ink pad. This is brushed corduroy. It's distress ink, but any nice sepia brown would do. And I've gone around the whole piece and lightly inked up the edges for a little bit of distress and aging, and it adds some depth to the page. Over here on this side, again, there's also some distress, and I like it, so I'm not even going to try to mess with that. The next element that I'm going to add is from this box. This is from a box that had little balls of thread. And I also got this at a French flea market last fall. So I put the little balls of thread into ephemera boxes, and now I just had the box left. I broke it down. I was going to recycle it. And then I thought, hold the phone. Free art supplies. And so instead, I'm going to just rough tear this. I'm going to keep this and this for some other project because that's very cool. I think that's my new bookmark. And now I can add this to the base. I am not going to put it matchy-matchy perfectly in the middle, although that doesn't look bad. When I place an element on the base, I am usually going to pull it down to the bottom third of the page. That's called visual thirds. It tends, when you're doing a collage layout, it tends to add a little more interest to the eye if you place it a third up or a third down rather than symmetrical. So I'm going to glue that down right there. Before I glue that down, I'd like to add a little bit of texture to this piece. So I have some tea-dyed gauze. We actually call this scrim in the UK, I think. So I took this piece, just a scrap from the scrap box of gauze, and I'm going to put that down asymmetrically before I add this element from the box. It's going to add some texture and some dimension, and kind of double down on the sepia palette here. I am not going to agonize over the glue. I'm just getting it tacked into place here because when I get this glued down, that will hold everything into place. Also, I want the edges to kind of be flying and fluttery off into space like this. I don't want them perfectly flat. When I was blocking this video, I assumed right from the get-go that my focal point was going to be a flower from Mr. Marshall's flower book. And that is a beautiful page. Goodness knows I'm craving flowers these days. But I wanted to show, just for interest's sake, what it would look like with something completely different for the focal point. And I decided to try a carte de visite, which is a baby cabinet card from the 1880s. Look, he's actually rolling a hoop. I like this much more than I thought I would, and I fell in love with this idea, and the flower will be coming back in another video. I like that it's a box shape with a box shape holding another box shape, that they are a frame and a frame and a frame, all going vertically. So that's the way the eye travels. It's nice and cohesive. Also, in this one in particular, you've got the vanilla colors and then the walnut color here in her hair and the boat fixings that pick up this. I really like this one, even though it's faded and doesn't have a lot going on. But it does have some really wild hair game and some beautiful trim on the shoulder here, like an epaulette. And what I really like about this photo is how she's facing this way, her face, but her gaze, if you could see it, is actually going this way. So we've got a little bit of a narrative here. She's facing here, looking here, and then the camera's looking there. So it's really mysterious and compelling. And again, the colors pick up throughout. I'm not sure which one I'm going to use, but I did realize that I don't actually like it too boxy. It was just a little too conventional. So instead, I decided to change the placement and pull the card down here so that it dissects, cuts in a piece, this line here, which just makes it more arrhythmic and adds interest to the eye. But there is a little glitch with that. If I pull it down here, then it really emphasizes where someone has written bouton couleur. Now, that could be an interesting aspect, some embellishment. If you can tell, there's actually some very light writing here in a blue pencil. I like that one. That tells a story. But the ink, it looks like it's ballpoint. It's bugging me. So I want to cover that up. I went to the scrap box, and I have a big scrap box. I found this fragment of a handwritten letter from 1902, and it has unusually dark ink. But I like that because it's picking up the black print here. It's also black writing, but it's handwritten, so it's kind of whimsical. And it does set that off nicely. I also have a boatload of marbled paper. And that's because I buy a lot of old dictionaries and encyclopedias. And back in the oldie days, they almost always had marbled front and end papers. So I have a lot of them. This one is lovely. It's got these muted colors. And so I like that because it would be bringing in a little bit of color into a piece that's pretty sepia. But at the same time, they're nice and they feel right with the theme. Here is another different handwritten piece. And this has the more traditional walnut ink and some foxing, which also emphasizes the colors everywhere, or lack of same, the tones. That has a really good feel to it, especially as the parchment paper picks up the same color in the gauze and the fading paper here. Here's another fragment of marbled paper. It's beautiful, and again, bringing in movement and color. And in this one, what I like is it's got some tobacco color there in the marbling, which would pull out this and this. Here's another fragment. Now, this one I'm leaning towards because I think when that's glued down, it's going to look like it's one thing, not just some trim. That it's going to look like it was designed that way for reasons we don't know about, but that would be pretty. But somehow it is not working. It's not. I think I don't like how these are too jangly. So weirdly, I'm leaning with the one that is sort of the most ordinary. It is not marbled. It's got this pebble pattern and very modest, humble colors there. But again, once this goes down, it is going to cover up those letters and go on here seamlessly. And you're going to have so many different sepia and tobacco and walnut colors picking up elements of the whole piece. When Oscar Wilde was writing poetry, he was once asked what he did for a living. And he said, I spend my morning figuring out where to insert a comma. Then I have lunch. After lunch, I spend the rest of the afternoon removing the comma. And I get that. I just spent an absurd amount of time off camera doing this. Blah, 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 blah. A lot of time. So there are 2 or 3 tricks that can help you choose when it's so close. One is you just get a stool or you stand up on your tippy toes and look at it from above. You can also take your camera or phone camera and look at the piece through your camera and see if that gives you another way of looking at it. Finally, a very true way is to hold the piece up so that you can imagine what it will look like when it's hanging. And that really changes your eye's interpretation. And when I did that, I was a little more happy with this. I've also decided to go with a different lady. And again, that's because the colors in this here and here are just consistent with all of the other tones in the piece. And there is something about her gaze that is very poignant. And I don't know what the story is, but there is one, and I love that. So I'm going to go with her. Now I want to add a little something up here, just to pull the eye, add some balance. I'm going to use mark making with a stencil and a soft chalk pastel. This is from a series that I love called, it's a Daler-Rowney, and it's the Warm Selection. And it comes in these great muted colors. So what I'm going to do is add a few numbers. And I'm just going to go up here to the top with my stencil, and I've got some water in my mister. Spritzer mister. And I'm spraying through the stencil to get my page damp. You do not want it soggy, just damp. And then you color over the stencil with the pastel. It's not going to look like it's in there. Not much. You have to work it in like this. And I don't want it to be perfectly even. So I'm just kind of stopping in the middle there. There we go. Just get that. And again, this is really leaning into that torn wallpaper look or peeling billboard look that I really, really like. And this is how that is looking. Messy and grungy and glorious. It's also given us a different brown tone. All through this, I've been talking about the sepia, the walnut, the tobacco colors. And I think here that we have gone into full tilt root beer. But I could be wrong about that. Anyway, I like it. I want to add something else, some more three-dimensional or mixed media kind of element. And it just so happens that I collect old cloth tape measures. I do not sew, I just have a lot of them. So I got out the box of tape measurers and I found this one. It's linen and it says made in England. So I am going to put that, trim that, and put that here. I'm going to bring made in England a little bit over to the right for some asymmetry. And I'm going to go and glue that down, and I'm not going to be using anything special, just my acrylic gel. I'm going to add one last piece to this. I had an idea when I started it that I wanted to make it three-dimensional, more of assemblage, and add this pince nez. It's one of the reasons why back in the choosing part, I went with this lady, because she's wearing a pince nez. And that's a little bit unusual with these photographs. And besides, I just happen to have a few of these in the studio kicking around, as one does. It's called a pince nez because it would sit on your nose like this. And pince nez is the French for pinch nose. So it would pinch your nose and sit there. And you could add a stick to it, and it would be the same way you would use a mask. Or you could add a ribbon. And then that ribbon would be pinned to your blouse. And then you could just pick it up as you need to. I wanted to put this here, and so I added a hole. And I did that using a Crop-a-Dile. A Crop-a-Dile is a fancy hole punch. You don't have to have one. And they're kind of pricey, but I got mine secondhand, and I do use it a lot since I work with book boards. But if you didn't have one, you could also use, say, a Fisker's hole punch would be good, a bookmaker's awl, a hand drill, or even just a nail. Get that in there. You can get a hole in there. Just to show you how collage gets done and assemblage, when I added this hole, I did not just gamble and put it anywhere and trust to dumb luck. I did a practice run. I took this spare book cover and added the hole approximately where I thought it would go. And then I tied it with ribbon to see what the effect would be and how this would move once it was tied. And having done that, I could compare it, looking here, and I did like the effect. So here we go. It's finished. And now it can be wired for hanging. It could be framed in a box frame, or what I would do is display it on a plate stand. This is for showing fancy china. And you can do the same. You could put it here, and then it would stand upright on top of a coffee table or a shelf or counter, and it's very fun. This piece is for sale. If you would like to read more about that, there is a link in the text below this video. There's also a link to my website where I have scans of vintage French Easter postcards. They are high res and they are free, so go get them. While you're there, please subscribe to my monthly online newsletter and have a look at my online shop. I hope everyone has a creative weekend. Now get up and go make something.